Coach, hey, thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. Appreciate you taking the time. I will say you've sort of saved my sanity, whether you realize it or not. In the throes of my sickness, I've dived deep into the dark recesses of Twitter and have gotten all hooked into the debate over MLS and the U.S. Open Cup. And I have not spent a waking hour away from those topics for the last 6 days. So you are breaking that. And so I owe you big time. And I want to, again, just thank you for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Excited to help out.
And it's free, right? So that's the beauty of it. Usually I have to find somebody. I have to pay them like $200 an hour just to hear me vent. So this is awesome. Hey, just to start out, you're a rookie here, so I usually start out with the rookies, and I just ask, tell me what your soccer journey has been like. How did you end up at Wartburg?
Yeah, so I grew up in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, so kind of backwaters for soccer in Wisconsin, but certainly not for Division III athletics.
Yeah.
Wisconsin Stevens Point athletics have been pretty strong for a lot of years. They're now adding soccer, which is cool for that area.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
But yeah, grew up in Stevens Point, became passionate about the game, had people around me that were similarly passionate. Ended up going to camps at UW Oshkosh when they were kind of the program in Wisconsin for Division III soccer. And then connected through different routes and what was right for me academically. Ended up at McAllister, but I was just telling somebody the other day, Toby Bars, who's the longtime coach at Oshkosh, was actually kind of the recommendation that got me in the door at McAllister. So played there the late 90s, early 2000s. Had a chance when I finished playing to spend a couple of years with the Minnesota Thunder. And then that kind of transitioned into coaching. So was one of the coaches kind of on the ground floor helping start things at Shattuck St. Mary's with their soccer center of excellence. That was my first full-time coaching position. Then through different shifts, ended up actually out in the D.C. area for a bit, was out with George Washington as well as with McLean Youth Soccer, doing some stuff, at that level and at the time with the Development Academy. But then wanted to be back in the Midwest, had an opportunity to come back and be, an assistant for Greg up at McAllister and work with some of the club teams in the Twin Cities. And then kind of when the Wartburg position opened up, knew I wanted to be, in the upper Midwest at a place where we could be nationally competitive, with a strong academic background. And Wartburg checked a lot of those boxes. So here I am.
It's interesting that you talk about Wisconsin because I've become a big fan of Wisconsin soccer.
Okay.
I'm very impressed with the quality that comes. Some of the stuff I don't like, right? But I attribute it more to like the Wisconsin culture of, this is weird. This goes down one of my rabbit hole theories is, right? You deal with cold, inclement weather, all that kind of stuff. It hardens you. And you got to keep movement is key. And so you see a lot of like energetic, high pace tempo teams out of Wisconsin. But they're one of the states where I'm like, man, there's a lot of great soccer going on. I've been saying, I think what impressed me the most is the Midwest-ish area and far out west, the quality of soccer. And it just dawned on me this year, like how good it is. I don't know if that's something you see, or am I totally spaced out on cold medicine?
No, I think the quality of play and the quality of soccer here in the Midwest and out west has been pretty strong. I just think having the viewpoint for the rest of Division III to see that, I think St. Olaf obviously provided a pretty good window into that this year. As you alluded to, there's some really strong teams in Wisconsin, whether it be UW Platteville, UW Eau Claire, had good years. Certainly MSOE had a great year, just didn't quite get in.
And they're always consistently good too.
For sure.
Coach
So,
Harrington.
I think there's been good soccer out here. I think you're right. We are in some ways a product of our environment too. The weather's not always friendly. Even for our athletes, the athletes we recruit predominantly, they're not
Hmm.
able to play year-round outside, and so
Yeah.
the adjustment to those pieces. So I think you kind of build the strengths you can
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the journey. And there is a lot of really good Division III soccer, whether you're
Yeah.
talking Minnesota, Iowa,
Yeah.
Wisconsin, Illinois.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a pretty darn good pocket of
Yeah.
national competitive soccer out here.
Totally agree, and I don't mean the weather thing in a bad way, right?
Mhm.
I'm a big believer. I think we've homogenized the game in the States too much, and I think we expect this homogenization of the game, and you see it in club soccer, and
Mhm.
we want to develop a little bit of a robot so it's easy to plug and
Mhm.
play anywhere. And I think the thing we're missing is tapping into the vast differences between how a player develops in
Mhm.
your neck of the woods versus how a player in New Jersey develops, or how a player down in Florida, or somebody down in Texas, Arizona who has to deal with 130-degree heat. I think it impacts the development of a player in much different ways. And to
Mhm.
me, how do you tap into all those different ways to bring together a cohesive team? I think that's more of an interesting conversation.
Oh,
Not
for
so much that you are different, right, or that Wisconsin is different, if that makes sense.
No, it's just building the strengths that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been involved with the ODP program for a lot of years, and at
Hmm.
the regional level, that's a big conversation. How do our teams from the Midwest compete with the team from the South, where the
Yeah.
guys are able to be out on Bermuda grass
Yeah.
for much of the year,
Yeah.
versus,
Yeah.
while our field looks great for good parts of the year, there are
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
some parts where grass field
Oh my
isn't
gosh.
as playable. So you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
be, I think a phrase was uniquely technical,
Yeah.
flat bounces and whatnot.
I
So.
have to. I'm writing that down. Uniquely technical. That's a great term.
Yeah.
But it
I,
is
I
true,
can't say
right?
I
Like,
can't say it was mine, but
yeah, yeah.
it's cool.
I'll attribute it to you. That's okay. I am. Right, and this is again goes to the homogeneity thing about the game, right? I think turf has been a wonderful boon for the sport. I mean that sincerely,
Mhm.
but I also think it's taken away some of that challenge of, right, Wartburg, University of Mount Union. Try playing on grass at the end of October and going into November and see how that goes for you, right? And after playing a whole season from August until then on that same field. And, right, it's total, like you said, just sets a whole set of different challenges.
Yeah.
Although,
But
anyhow,
that said, it's raised the bar for what we have to do facility wise.
yeah.
That's been we've been really lucky to be supported the way we have here at Wartburg.
Hmm.
Our ground staff has continually done a better and better job.
Yeah.
This year, when we were hosting the first couple rounds of the tournament, the field was in better shape than it used to be in mid-October.
Yeah.
So the progress has been there. Where I think the soccer still comes out, but yeah, definitely different challenges for sure.
I am totally going to post a picture or throw up a picture of Salzwedel Field, which for anybody who has not, it is remarkable. Like, you can't go wrong playing there. I'm sorry, even in bad conditions, you can't go wrong playing there.
Mhm.
Like, that to me is like it's if I had silly money and I could take my silly money and donate it to somebody and say, hey, I'm going to give you silly money, but this is the facility that I'm expecting you to build. Yours would sort of be an example of that. Just in terms of the grass field, size, right? It's not, does again, from my angle, it doesn't look narrow, it looks healthily wide,
Yep.
right? It's flat. Yeah, and you got plenty of space around you. But so I posted while we're talking, I'm throwing it up there because I think it is
Awesome.
it is such a cool place to play. And like I said, anybody who's looking at Wartburg, you can't go wrong with a facility like that. All right, we totally went off track on that. I apologize because this is about you and Wartburg. Let we'll start with the now generic. Tell me how, in your opinion, your season went.
I think we were I think we were really happy.
Mm-hmm.
We came into the year with pretty high expectations. I mean, the year before we had a lot of ties, but we also only had one regular season loss the year before, and we returned a good bit. This year, I think, certainly we played a tough schedule. I think anytime you look at it, there's elements of fortune where things go your way. There's elements where they don't go your way. But yeah, we were really happy. I mean, I think as starting point, you always want to be tough to play against. You also want to be able to play skillful, kind of situationally aware soccer. And I think we did a good job of that. And I think our program culture, which is something, any of the successful programs you talk to, they're talking about culture. We did a good job of not just building that coming into the year, but building it throughout the year. Where, our one loss on the year up until we lost to Gustavus in the tournament, I think we reeled off 6 wins after that. And a lot of that was culture growth, and we were in a better place entering November than when we entered October. So overall, we're really happy with it. I think it's something we felt has been coming. They talk a lot about, it was a Bill Walsh quote, you don't have a championship culture once they give you the trophy. You have the culture, then you get the trophy.
Yeah.
I think we felt we were at that place. And it was great to be able to break through and kind of break through that ceiling to be where we've kind of thought we were ready to be. So.
Can you just talk a little bit about culture? I'm a big culture guy. Like that to me, again, pet theory. Here we go again. To me, culture is of all the things we talk about and all the things they talk to coaches about. That's the crux. I could usually pinpoint what I consider good programs based on the culture they've built within that program, and I'm not even wins and losses. To me, wins and losses are the results of where your culture is leading you. Sure. Could you just talk a little bit about that? How important it is for you and your program? And I'll just say the buy-in, right? Because it's not just about you, right? Like to me, it's not just we're going to impose this sort of overall culture on the team. I'd say you want it to come from the players as well.
For sure. And it's always a work in progress. I think that's one of the things we've talked about. It was, and I was on our pregame shirts the last couple of years. Progress never stops, and there's a lot of depth to why that's on our shirts. But I think ultimately, it's you keep getting better no matter what point you're at. And for us, and I think the vision, and it was maybe something I brought with me from whether it's my time at McAllister, being around the program at St. Thomas, which before going to Division I was one of the standard bearers out here in this part of the country. It was thrive in all you do by getting better every day, and it pieced together a couple parts from it. And so for us, whether it's what they do personally, academically, athletically, those habits that lead to success, there are a lot of habits that overlap. And so they have chances in so much of their life to develop those habits where when we get to August, September, October, November, those habits can be even more refined because of what they do elsewhere.
I don't want to. I mean, do you remind them almost like, is it one of the things that you remind them every day about how their behaviors are shaping?
Yes. Yeah. I think you try to, and I think, it's in different ways, right? If you're saying the same thing every day, I think the message gets lost, but I think you find different ways to address it, whether that's in praising effort or success or growth, in other areas. When a guy from one semester to the next makes, a 0.5 jump in his GPA, like that's a huge jump. That's big progress. If it happens in the weight room and somebody adds 10 reps to their max, holy cow, that's big growth. But yeah, I think if you're doing it right, it's a daily thing that us as a staff, as well as our guys and our program leaders, buy into and embody and help recognize. I think a phrase is kind of that gentle pressure of just, not coach comes in and it's big pressure in this moment, but reminders, rewards, celebrating success. Those are big parts of it for us.
Yeah. How much ownership do you expect? Because you mentioned I'll just say your team leaders.
Yep.
I think that's what you said.
Yep.
Like, how much do you rely on them to be those standard bearers rather than you being the mouthpiece? Does that make
Oh,
sense?
it's huge, and it's been the development over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
This last fall was my seventh fall here at Wartburg. I think we really saw a significant step forward around, fall of 21, winter of 2022,
Mm-hmm.
as everybody that was in the program were guys that had been recruited in like normal cycles in the time
Mm-hmm.
that our staff had been here. And there were already beginning to be role models and leaders who were guys we'd identified and brought in. And I think they then have turned it around. And now the leaders that were younger guys when they were here, are helping push culture to another point. So, yeah, whether it's how they embody it and how they exemplify it, or how they help bring it out
Mm-hmm.
in others, or continue help to grow in our culture. I think that's been a big conversation here that last month and this month. We had success, but we can't stop growing. We can't just say, "Oh, it's good the way it is."
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's been a big conversation point here last month and this month with the guys.
Okay. This is just a side question to that. It's like, now that you seem to have this, right? You have a cadence going, and new guys, old guys, graduating guys.
Yep.
Do your alumni still keep tabs and keep? I don't want. I know of instances, and especially like the top 20, some of the top 20 teams, like they have alumni like, hey, I'm still expecting this program to behave a certain way, right? Like to perform a certain way, and if I don't see it, I'm going to let you know. Do you have that?
To a degree, yeah,
Yeah.
to a degree. I mean, I think our alumni are definitely engaged.
Yeah.
Whether it's helping with recruits, checking in, coming back for
Mm-hmm.
alumni stuff. I think there is a standard that's been set.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's generally been pretty darn supportive from the guys,
Mm-hmm.
certainly that have graduated since I've been
Mm-hmm.
here, where they know it's still a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's definitely, if from our program leaders in the past, if I was to reach out, by text, if I texted three guys, I'd probably get two phone calls and a text
Mm-hmm.
response within half an hour right
Oh
now.
wow. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
they're aware of it, and I know that connection with our guys is there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we've been pretty fortunate with that, and I think it's kind of cool looking back at different landmarks over the
Mm-hmm.
past 7 years that have helped us build to this point where they're core parts of our culture now that weren't in place in 2018.
Yeah.
That we've just had to kind of keep growing and leaning back on some of that.
I don't know if this is the right way to ask, but I always ask it. And you're 7 years removed, so I get it. I mean, you guys do have a history, a
For sure.
good, solid history of soccer success, right? Like,
Yes.
what were you hired for a purpose? Like, not to dismiss you and your capabilities, and I'm sure you're an excellent interview. Hence, us talking right now. But I always wonder about the process by which an athlete, and it's not just a soccer thing. I will say that so that
Yeah.
you know, athletic directors have a mind of their own,
Hmm.
right? And they're looking to accomplish things because they want to look good. And I have a tendency to believe that if somebody is in the process of hiring a coach, they're looking at it as an opportunity to do something. And so I'm just curious, was there maybe you can't express it, but was there, like I said, a purpose? Was there a rationale, or they said, we're going with you because we really believe that you're the guy to come in, and maybe it could just be all the cultural aspects that you wanted to implement or that you had a vision for that was really intriguing to them. It could. I know of cases where it comes down to we want you to put our program back on the map, right? I don't think necessarily the case for you guys, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I think if I could say there's a purpose and why, somebody like me was interesting to Wartburg at the time, I've been involved in some pretty successful programs in this part of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And the habits you develop when building that excellence and then maintaining that excellence, those are things that are hard to develop outside of a setting like that. And I think the standard here at Wartburg, whether it's been within our men's soccer program or across the entire department, is that we aspire to be nationally competitive, and that there really isn't a ceiling on our success.
Yeah.
We each have to find our own route to kind of get there.
Yeah.
The soccer player pool in Iowa, which is good, and it reflects that in the soccer played within our conference. It's probably not as vast as the football player pool. So we have to find our own route to be successful. But this is a school that really embraces the student athlete experience, that you can be a strong student and an elite athlete, and that enhances who you ultimately become for the next 40 to 50 years. And I think being a school of 1,500 that's always in the top 25 of the Directors' Cup, that's kind of the standard in our department. And so I think, given that, the last couple of years before I got hired here, we'd been really, really good at McAllister. Had gone from in 2012, we were, I think, 4-13 to an undefeated regular season and an NCAA tournament bid in 2015, and 2016 being ranked really high, but losing a couple times to St. Thomas, who went to the Final Four. We had kind of built something where I think that process of building and then beginning to sustain excellence, that's the expectation here. And I think we've made really good progress with that. So
that's go ahead.
I don't think there was anything inherently wrong, or that they had to be addressed. But I think there were things that could be freshened up, fresh set of eyes. That there's certainly some structures and things that the guys have done for 20 plus years that alums from 20 years ago still come back to talk about their experiences doing. But there also are some things that we've continued to do over the past 7 years that helped us to get to a point where we had a year that we were pretty happy with, and can be pretty excited for what the future looks like.
Okay, let's shift over to the soccer. I think I've asked a lot of the philosophical questions already. You're probably like, are we just going to talk about it? All right. Season. This is a loaded question because it was a scrimmage. But I'm curious, your game against St. Olaf, who, in hindsight, right? In hindsight, what was your takeaway from your scrimmage there? Because I'll tell you why I'm asking is because now I'm thinking St. Olaf is rightfully so, national champions, they right there. And so everyone, like it or not, is below them, at least from a... And so I'm just curious, you play St. Olaf. I don't know the score. I didn't watch it, whatever. But what were your impressions of that game against who would end up being the eventual national champion?
Yeah, and I think that it goes back a couple of years, right? Actually, these last 2 years, or last fall and this fall, were the first time St. Olaf hadn't been on our schedule in years. It hadn't worked out. They will be again going forward.
Right.
But we played them, actually the worst loss I've ever had in college soccer was fall of 21 at St. Olaf. And so, we knew how good they were.
I'm looking now. You know that, right?
And it was one of those where the difference between us probably wasn't that great, but they were very good and opportunistic. And then we went from that to then winning, getting a tie with Gustavus opening game of 22, and then beating St. Olaf second game of 22. So we knew that we were competitive. There'd been a bit of history, and kind of knew that the soccer in our region, from seeing what Chicago had done the year before, that it was right. That was right there. And so the scrimmage was very competitive, and ended up being something where we knew coming out of that we might not see a stronger opponent for, we'd see teams as good, but we probably weren't going to see a stronger opponent the entire year. I think it's part of what gives us confidence is not only were we able to compete and perform against everybody, but then to see what they did, it really opens up the potential for the rest of us to say, hey, ending the year with the big trophy, that's not, that's not out of the realm of possibility. and it's
You
just
can tag along. I always say, like, when you measure yourself against somebody like that and you realize how in you are, right? Like you are, man, it could just be a game away, right? Like it could be one of those things where, like, you could tag along on their coattails for all intents and purposes because you're that good, right? And it's just a matter of charting your course and competing at the right level and the right time.
yeah, very much so. I mean, we've talked about it here. I mean, that pod that was St. Olaf, U Chicago, Claire, and Calvin. I mean, any of those teams,
Could have won it.
yeah,
Could
you
have
credit
won
to
it.
St. Olaf for going and doing that. But I think you'd say the same thing for every pod that was there in the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
uh,
totally agree.
so I think that's part of it where, hey, we're playing the right teams, we're doing the right things here day to day, and it's just continuing to invest in that, and because the margins at that point get smaller and smaller, but
Smaller,
have a
yeah,
bigger
yeah.
influence.
The that's very true that you say. I thought by the time the Sweet 16 rolled around, you could have legitimately said everyone has a chance, and it's not at that point, at that level. Don't get me wrong. I think it matters. I'm the guy who says soccer matters. Like you have to be a good soccer team.
Yep.
That matters. I might not like the style, but you have to be good.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get there, it's all about the intangibles that help you get further, right? So do you get lucky, right? Like you might go to a PK shootout and your keeper has a great day, or I don't know, little things like that is where I think that starts to matter. But Sweet 16, I was like, I couldn't tell you who's going to bounce out of this. Could be anybody. Right?
For sure.
How close to you are you to Decorah? Luther?
About 75 minutes. So
Okay.
pretty near.
I'm a big fan. Coach Garcia Prats. I'm a big fan of his. My favorite sports logo. Talk about the American Rivers Conference. He talked about it a while back when he was first on, and just the competitiveness of it. There's a core group of really great, talented programs, right? So that historically there's somebody. So I just would like your impression.
Yeah, no, it's a very competitive conference that I think every year, 6 teams make the conference playoffs. It's growing to the point where it's 7 or 8 teams that are truly competitive for those 6 spots. And, and I think you look at it, like obviously talking about Chris, the year they went to I think the last time they made a pretty deep run in the tournament, they finished 5th in our regular season, and ended up having to go on the road and get on a pretty good run. So like our conference has been very competitive. If you look over the last 10 years between deep runs in the tournament, and I think it's each time, we might be at different points and figuring out how competitive we can be on the national level and what we need to do or rework. But yeah, there's a really good history of soccer. I think, one of the things that helps us kind of as you look at this part of the Midwest, there are very few Division I programs.
Yeah.
St.
Somebody
Thomas,
said that
Minnesota.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Drake in Iowa, UMKC in Kansas.
Yeah.
So I think there are some really good players that are recognizing that they can have a great experience at the Division III level because there are also some really strong institutions that back that up.
Yeah. Somebody was telling me that somebody made the same comment about maybe it was Coach Chris. Maybe it was him. I can't remember. That talked about, and I never put 2 and 2 together because I'm slow that way.
Yeah.
That the lack of these Division I programs that become almost like, I don't want to say black holes for talent, because they attract a lot of good guys, but they also attract a ton of kids for the idea of it, and then once they get there, they fall out of love of the game or of trying to compete, whatever it is.
Yep.
And he mentioned that, and I started to think that's probably true, right? Like there's probably an impact to that. I mean, now going down another tangent. How Do you deal with kids who are like, I'd like to go Division One, but I don't want to go too far, and these candidates who might be locally they're not floating their boat? Do you have conversations like that? Whereas out here in the East, it's like Division One, Division One, Division One, right? Like,
Sure.
it's like you throw a stone, any
Yeah.
division you could hit. So.
Yeah, no, we definitely do. And there's some guys that are just hanging on anything Division One.
Yeah.
But there are other guys that look at it and just say, well, for the school, for the kind of experience I'm going to have. I mean, this last year we were playing later into November than any other NCAA school in Iowa.
Yeah.
The experience
It's,
here was really good. And it's just about finding the guys that are the right fit.
yeah.
And you can look at it and see who some of our more impactful guys as first years have been. I think if I think back to my time at GW, the last year I was there, we won the Atlantic 10 regular season. There are probably a couple guys. I think there are a couple guys on our roster that would have either seen significant time or might have started for that group. So like the level of player we have access to is pretty darn high.
Yeah.
And the way, particularly within Iowa and some of the adjacent states, the appeal of Wartburg and how we do the student athlete experience and that you can really maximize both has helped us to have access to guys.
Yeah. That's interesting. What? And you do have Division One experience, and I'm just curious. Like, have you, in your experience, did you see or did you know players that would be? This is a terrible question, and I'm not calling into question your ethics or morals or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. Like, you're bringing on a player, and you're like, yeah, he's a good player. He won't get a look, really, to be a starter for 3 years. Oh, I'm making it up. But you would know in the back of your head, man, if he went to Wartburg, he'd be a starter right out the gate. Did you see guys like that? I don't mean to say like you're doing something nefarious, right?
No.
I think it's just the nature of the beast that way.
100%. And right, we all know each other. The soccer world's really small. So to have conversations, whether it's been on the Division One side or on the Division Three side of it, all we're looking to do is to get the guys here that feel that what we're providing is the right fit for them. And, in some cases, there's going to be the guy that processes it. Well, I just want that opportunity. If I can make it onto the field at X Division One by year 4, that's worth it. For other guys, if the right fit in the field for them is, hey, I can get on the field and play in an NCAA tournament in my first year. Well, that's the experience I want.
That was me. I was like, I just wanted to play. I didn't care. That was always me. But I didn't mean anything bad by that. No. I just in the context of that, right?
There's a lot of overlap between the talent level at Division One and Division Three or Division Two. Just across soccer as a whole, the talent level is huge. And
I say again, that's why maybe I become like this data guy. Like I want to see things. Like, yo, you think Division One's so much better? Oh, show me. But so. I don't, of course, for obvious reasons, I don't think Division III as a whole gets enough credit in the soccer world, both men's and women's games, for the quality of soccer that gets played. And I'm convinced Division I soccer, the only thing people think of, really, Division I soccer is defined by the top 10 programs in the country. And they don't see the other. Right, and I mean that's normal human nature, but they don't see the other stuff, the other programs that, they're not Duke, they're not, right, they're not UNC, they're not, it's a different thing. And I think it's, hey, we've exalted one and at the cost maybe of another, and I think it's a lot more even. Especially on the soccer side, just pure soccer. I think it's a lot closer.
100%. And that's our challenge as we get to know guys and develop relationships on the recruiting side. And then while they're here, is to, hey, what you're doing is at a pretty high level, and it's not important what's happening elsewhere. It's about what's happening here and how it fits you.
Yeah. All right, so why Wartburg? Why? I know we're having this conversation because you sent me a mailer that said, hey, we're really interested in you as a player. I really appreciate that. And right? Why would you be? What is it about Wartburg that is going to make me convince me to take my fifth year with you?
It
I
goes back
totally
to
threw that
yeah.
curveball, but
No, it's fine, but that's right in the wheelhouse, right? That's a
yeah,
conversation we have all the time.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
I think the opportunity to be, a strong, dedicated student and an elite athlete is unique here, and we're supported not just from the relationships with the academic and support stuff on campus, but also from a facility standpoint. It's not like you go into the science building and the facilities are massively better than the soccer side. Like
Yeah,
those should take priority,
yeah.
but then you look at what we have athletically across the board, and our facilities, there's just not a change. And while it's great to have those facilities, I think it speaks to the greater commitment that, hey, you can be a strong student and something else. And the commitment to the experiences that you can have doing both and what that means for you for 40 to 50 years. I think that shows in our grad placement and in the opportunities that our students have and how high a percentage have the opportunities they want after graduation.
I will say I'm sold. I just got to get fit. Like I got to get this cold over, and I got to get fit. I will say one of the, at least in relatively, going back to my days at school, Wartburg always had a reputation of investing very much in the academic side, so the facilities, but also doing so on the athletic side, which I think was a little bit ahead of the curve, right? Like, I think it was a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of its investment on the athletic side, and that they approached it almost both the same way, right? And they're not the same, but right, like you said, your science facility is going to be top notch. You're going to be able to become a scientist or a chemist or whatever you want to do because you're in some of the best facilities that money can buy. But then when you go to soccer, you're going to go onto a great field, practice field. You're going to have all the resources you need, and I think you've earned that reputation. And like I said, and I showed the picture. I'll show them again now. The facilities that I see again from a distance, I mean, are just stunning. Like it just makes me jealous. It makes me so jealous. I could have been,
Yeah.
you know. All right. How are you feeling going into? So you're having this cracker of a season, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will say I don't want to touch on the ties because I totally get that. I mean, and I'm looking at some of the games you're playing where you tie, right? You did McAllister, right? I could totally see North Park in Chicago. I totally understand it. Platteville, you tie. I totally get that. Wisconsin Whitewater, which I thought another great example of Wisconsin soccer. I thought they could have gone further, but I don't know enough. I can't get an interview there. Luther, right? I get that, but how are you feeling once you win? You win the arc, right? Like you beat Loris, which again another one that was fantastic. How was the sense? How was the feeling going into the NCAA's, knowing you're going up against Gustavus?
Yeah. No, I think obviously Gustavus is a program that had been there, had made runs in the tournament before. I think we were confident from the schedule we had played and everybody we'd seen, and even history with Gustavus. I think we were confident going into that match that if we performed and took care of details, we could be very successful. I think we also knew, I think, and Gustavus probably felt the same way, that the two of us playing each other, that's a pretty tough first round game.
Yeah,
And I think I think that carried over. But I think we're excited, we're optimistic, we're thrilled to be able to host
yeah,
and have that experience for the guys. It's a bit tough in that a couple of things, one credit to Gustavus, but also some things we kind of could have done differently within that match. Giving up 3 goals in that game when we only gave up 6 the rest of the year.
yeah.
I think there's maybe we felt we left a little bit on the table, but certainly I don't think there was any intimidation. I think it was just simply perhaps maybe a little bit of newness of being in the tournament for the
Yeah,
first time in a while.
yeah.
but
It
overall,
carries. It's a weight. I don't think anybody wins it. You have to be a repeat NCAA for a while to sort of get almost like it's another game. It's another game. You could say it all you want, but in the back of your head, if it's the first time, you're like, oh, NCAA is right. Like I said, newness.
For sure. So yeah, I think we were confident. I think we felt good. I think reflecting back on it, there probably was an element of that. But credit to Gustavus on the day, and it just speaks again to the quality and volume of really good teams in this part of the country. That was the first round match.
Yeah. And let me just say, right? I mean, you were. It was a gauntlet of a weekend, whether you beat Gustavus or not, because your next opponent would have been the winner of Calvin versus Greenville, and Calvin was the winner. And I'm a big fan of Calvin. Some particular things, I'm like, it doesn't float me. But as a team, I mean, just outstanding. I thought they were another one where it's like these guys, if everything falls right and they get the luck and those intangibles right, they could win it. Like I had no doubt about that. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
What was the game like? Like what you lose 3-1, you're confident, but was there something about the game that just again, not to take away from Gustavus, right? And not to say that you guys are terrible, but was there something about the game where it was like it didn't materialize for you?
Throughout much of the year, we'd started games really, really well. And we can see it in the first 5 minutes, and then manage to kind of grow into the game, get it back to 1-1, and then I think the PK we conceded was probably in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the half. I don't remember exact minute mark, but I think I think those two moments, the start of the half and the end of the half, just left us in a situation where we had to chase the game. And the third goal was representative of that. I think there were chances both ways in the second half, but we'd put ourselves a bit behind the 8 ball in terms of not managing a couple moments at the start and the end of the half. The balance of the game I thought was pretty darn even. The score, was it a 3-1 game? I don't know. At
that point, it doesn't matter.
We needed to manage a couple moments better, and credit to them that they did.
Yeah, it's true, right? Because you are chasing from 5 minutes in. You bring the equalizer back, and then you're thinking. I would start thinking, man. At usually around the 30th or 35th minute, I start thinking, I'm okay if having had to catch up in an early goal. We're at 1-1. I'm okay going into halftime at 1-1. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm assuming it was tight, right? I'm looking at your stats. It wasn't. There's nothing outrageously unbalanced about it. It was pretty straightforward. And then you concede a penalty, which I didn't see, but right. And now you're playing where you could have been like, oh, get to halftime, we're okay. Now you're like, we have to get another goal back, and going into halftime that way, and then the second half, right? You're whether I always say it's not a thing of tactics, whether you realize it or not. You're stretching yourself if you're trying to get that goal, right? The catch-up goal, not the winning goal, the catch-up goal, because you're a little bit, I don't want to say careless, but your priority is we got to get this goal, otherwise we're out. It makes you do things intentionally or unintentionally that leave you a little bit more vulnerable than you're accustomed to. I don't know if that made sense, but
I mean, we didn't trail very often during the year, and was proud of the way the guys responded to be able to get the goal back in the first half. In that moment, that was big. And obviously, I think it's probably the lead up and things that happened in the minutes leading up to that penalty that, if there's something where you'd say, we wish we had that back, it was probably those few minutes.
Oh, is that me or you?
That would be me. I just declined it. So.
All right. Couple. See how you're having an awesome time. You're like, hey, party with SimpleCoach. And you said I just looked. I mean, it's interesting. Defensively, you guys were remarkable. Just again, statistically, because I watched some games, but defensively, you guys were pretty remarkable. And you're right. I mean, you didn't concede a lot, like at all. Like all your ties were even 0-0, so it was, like it was.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. Like you can't find that goal, but so yeah, 3 goals is a little bit to me is a little bit of a misnomer. I would be like, oh, well, that's kind of odd, right? Like what happened there, but. All right, so I got to ask you because I'm cognizant of your time, and we've been rambling, and I really do appreciate it. It's fun. I see how it works. I like sort of get tuned in, and this is the best soccer conversation I've had off of Twitter in 6 days. So, all right, so now you've done all this. You have a really successful. I mean, anybody would have traded. Most people would have traded spots with you, right? 12-2-6 or whatever it was. You get to the NCAA's. Yeah, you get knocked out in the first round, but you get knocked out against Gustavus. Hey, not too shabby, right? You didn't shoot yourself. You good showing. What do you do in the spring? Like, what's your, what's that? You're trying to me, it's the spring is like this launching pad for the fall, right? And so to me, if you have such a successful fall, you got to figure out, hey, I have to reset and take a step forward. And so what's that spring look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's certainly the last month and a half have been a lot from a culture standpoint. Who are our leaders? How are they leading? And what are our priorities to refresh so that they're things that we all really buy into and embody? And so that's been ongoing. We haven't used any of our contact dates with the guys yet. We'll do that. We actually, because of the way our academic calendar is set, our spring break is actually starting. Last day of classes before break will be this Friday. So when they get back in early March, we'll start our contact dates soon after that. I think there's certainly an assessment period of who's put in work and who's really developed, because we've seen some guys take some pretty significant jumps between December, January, February to when we actually see them in March. So I think there will be that assessment. I think we have some really talented young attacking guys that are on campus right now that I think developing confidence and consistency where, we really felt that some of those ties, they're at the very least even, and more of those than not, we were maybe a little bit on top of it, that we could have differentiated those games if we had been a little bit more effective. So I think those are some priorities. I also think it's helping guys grow into roles, because we did graduate. We do have a few guys coming back to do 5th years next year, from a playing standpoint. So that's going to help us. We don't graduate quite as much, but there's still some roles that guys are going to have to grow into. So a lot of it is individual development, team development, culture development. It's a process. Maybe there are different tactics, things from year to year that we need to focus on, but I think that growth process of individual and team development, that's our focus, and it's kind of fun at this time of year, and that can be our focus, and we get a couple opportunities to build towards results with our spring competition date as well as our alumni game later in the spring. But largely it's developmental, and it can be about us. Our process.
Yeah. And what's your recruiting? I know the whole FAFSA thing has kind of made a total mess of everything. Like, what does your recruiting class look like? And are you done? I mean, are you done? Are you not done because of circumstances, or?
I think right now, I can say we're not done, and it's largely because of circumstances. I'd say we're probably about 3/4 done, and I think if this had been a normal year with what had been the FAFSA process, I think we'd be done, or like 90 to 95% done. So no, we're excited about it. There probably are a couple of key spots we still need to fill, but we've got guys who we know are really interested, and it's just being able to get into the nuts and bolts, what the finances look like. Once we can get a little further into that.
I know that feeling. Can I ask you this? I just thought of this. Are these all Iowa farm boys like that? I know it's terrible. That was terrible. I'm a New Jersey guy, so I characterize everybody by, if you're out from Midwest, you're a farm boy. It's going to get a lot of hate. But is it mostly? Is Wartburg by the nature? I think your football program attracts a lot of players from a very big footprint. I'm just wondering, is the same thing true for
Yeah.
the soccer program? Is there something about Wartburg that makes it a regional school that kids
Right.
will come from farther from Wisconsin from?
Yeah, I think so, and I think probably even more so that like I think football's become more regional as they've had
Yeah,
kind of elite national level success.
yeah.
Whereas I think the core of the roster still probably comes from within 2 hours of campus.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
for us, a lot of our guys are coming from the bigger cities within the Midwest, within
Mm-hmm.
a 4 to 5 hour drive. Our roster is probably about 40 to 45% out of Iowa. Whether we're talking Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Des Moines, like that's kind of the area. It's typically from the guys who are playing with the bigger clubs in those areas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think in our class right now, I think we have 5 states represented in our class.
Mm-hmm.
We will get some guys from farther out west. I mean, we've got 3 guys from Colorado, on our roster looking ahead to next year.
Yeah.
So it's primarily, I'd say we're probably 85, 90% Iowa and the adjacent states, and then 10 to
Yeah.
15% outside of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it certainly, again, that's each of us figuring out our model.
Yeah.
Within 2.5 hours of campus, football can probably fill 60 to 70% of the roster with guys that can help them get closer to a national championship.
Yeah.
For us, we have to just look a little bit farther.
Look further. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it's interesting because I look at I'm always curious about that because I think there's a lot of programs that manage to bring in their footprint's a lot bigger than traditionally. And I think it's not only because they're in search of, but it's because I think they're a lot more willing to go. Like I think back in the day, it was a little bit harder for kids to pack up and go further away. And I think kids nowadays are be like, it's not a big deal for me from New Jersey to go to Iowa, right? Like if that's where I choose to go, that's where I'm going to go. I think it's a little bit psychologically a little bit easier for them, or it was. So that's my again pet theory. All right, Coach. Last question for you, and then I'll let you get on with your day.
Yep.
So too early to talk about goals for 2024 season? Or do I have to have you back on board 2 weeks before preseason?
We can do that too. I think if you look at it, right, we're able to get to the point of second in the regular season of conference, winning the conference tournament, so having a trophy here. Well, that's not just automatically going to happen. We have to. There's a lot of work to get back to that point, but we also know what it looks like and what it feels like to be in an NCAA tournament. And I think it's just like we had talked about coming out of the exhibition against St. Olaf at the start of the year. I think there's more certainty of what needs to happen now and what it needs to look like in the fall for us to be able to make a deeper run in the tournament. And that's always been our aspiration. And that's and there've been years we've been nationally ranked previously. So it's been the route we've been on. And so I think it's just continuing with that. I think we know with a greater degree of certainty that if we do the right things day to day, the possibility to be there and to have a trophy coming out of conference and to be able to make a push farther in the tournament's real. So maybe that addresses goals, but it's more kind of process based as we talk about it. But there's a greater degree of knowledge and experience now informing us for next year.
They always say, because I geeked out for a while on climbing Mount Everest. Not me actually climbing, that's absurd. But just the whole concept of climbing and what does that mean? And they always say, like, the last 250 feet of climbing Mount Everest is harder than the first 10 miles of getting there, right? That's the hardest. And to get to where, right, you're competing for, that's the hard part. This is where the nitty gritty, this is where the details matter. I would say the details matter. Details matter. So make sure you bring O2 for you in that final ascent. Anyhow, Coach, thank you very much. Again, this is fantastic. Really enjoyed the conversation. Happy to have you on again in 2 weeks before when you've charted out everything and just to talk about how things are shaping up. I'll definitely keep keep a continued eye out for you guys. And I'll just add you guys to the list of teams I watch. I'm gonna have to now. It's a long list now. Like, I don't know if I have enough hours in a day to watch all the games I've committed to watching.
So. We'll help you out. I know Rob at MSOE. We see them early opening weekend.
Yeah. Oh, so. I might. Where are you home? Or
we'll be there. We'll be in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So
I would love to, if I could figure out a way. I would love to. That's great. I'm a big fan of Rob's. He's a great guy, great human being. Great. Love his conversations I've had with him. Just fantastic. So
yeah, he and I have to be careful. When we see each other at recruiting events, we sit and talk. I think we become worse recruiters. Because of the conversations. So.
Yeah.
But no, it's definitely, we're fortunate as part of coming to a place like Wartburg where there had been the history and tradition, whether it's my own connections or the connections that were here with the program, to be connected with the right programs, the right people that help us the experience we want for our athletes.
Yeah. Makes life so much easier, right? So much better.
For sure.
Yeah. So you don't want to be miserable doing this. That's what I see it. No. It's always good to surround yourself with the right people. Otherwise, it's not worth it. So. All right, Coach. Hey, again, thank you very much. Do appreciate it, and we'll be talking soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.